Lesson 8. Tapas. Unfortunately, not the Spanish kind of tapas, but the Sanskrit, which is totally the opposite. Tapas is the practice of austerity. Some people think that practicing austerity, when not necessary, is a form of masochism, self-hurt. Of course, it is not that at all. But sometimes it is being interpreted in the wrong way, and then it can end up becoming like that. First, why is there the need to practice austerity? Practicing austerity means to be subjected to discomfort in order to gain strength. The physical body is an organism that only functions properly if we maintain it. And it can only feed the higher levels of consciousness if it is well maintained. Because as a result of well maintaining the physical body, we are brimming with healthy, vital energy. And it is this vital energy that fuels the higher levels of consciousness. The crown chakra, the location of all those wonderful characteristics that we call the royal characteristics. Tapas is especially applicable in the modern time that we live in. In the past, before the invention of all the technology that we know today, all the machinery that we have today, everything was done on foot and by hand. Kneading dough to make bread was very hard work. Now you push a button and a machine will do it for you. Washing clothes was a very hard work. Now you push a button and a machine does it for you. You don't have to walk stairs anymore because there's an elevator. And you step into a car or a bus or a train to go places where you want to or need to be. So, if we don't pay attention, we are not using the physical body anymore, challenging it to be strong and healthy and brimming with vital energy. So, practicing austerity, it's a niyama, it is something that we need to implement when we come to the conclusion that it is necessary for us. There are people who practice austerity instinctively. You probably do it yourself. When you have some spare time and you feel a little bit sluggish, maybe you go to the gym to do some exercise. That is practice of austerity. Or you take your bicycle from the shed and you make a bicycle ride, working up a little sweat along the way. That is practice of austerity. Making a long walk, a firm walk in the park, or hiking in the mountain, or jogging. Not everybody has the discipline to do that, but many people intuitively or instinctively, when feeling a little bit languid, a little bit sluggish, they naturally engage in a certain activity that falls under the category of practicing austerity. You see here the third illustration of a very much emaciated yogi. These yogis are called fakirs. Fakirs are masters in extreme austerity. They eat very, very austere. I almost used the word poor, but that sounds negative. Very austere. And they subject themselves to, they walk on glass just to show how austere they are and how much in control they are. They walk on burning coal. They also lie on a bed of nails. There's no illustration in this handout. There is somewhere there is a handout with the illustration of an emaciated yogi lying on a bed of nails and looking very comfortable. Austerity is a practice that was recognized as being necessary by spiritual people thousands of years ago. It is the reason why monks, whether in the East, in the Orient, or in the West, in the Occident, monks always live very austere lives. In many aspects. They throw away the clothes that distinguish themselves as individuals, and they all wear the same gray or brown cloth to help them control ego. Then they live in faraway places, in the mountains, in the forest, far away from the hustle and bustle from the city, in silence, where they can focus on studying the Holy Scriptures. But an important part of all spiritual communities is exercise. The traditional martial arts as we know them, karate, aikido, kung fu, all originated in temples. They do not originate from knights or ninjas or other warriors. Their origin is in the temples. They distinguish from the warfare martial arts in that they are very meditative. They're not necessarily focused on killing people. They are focused on concentration, on controlled movement. That's why traditional martial arts have so many forms. And in Tai Chi, very much slowed down. But karate, hapkido, kung fu, they have many forms, with and without weapons. And it's all about concentration. Basically, it's asana in motion. It requires mindfulness. It forces you to focus. But also, it's physically often very hard, very challenging. So that you develop this healthy amount of vital energy that fuels the higher levels of consciousness, which is, of course, key in any spiritual practice. Yes?
A question, but isn't that the easy way to just run away from everything, go to a temple, close yourself down, where there is no temptation, no real world, no anything? Then obviously it's silent. I mean, wouldn't it, the challenge be find God with the disturbance like here, for example, all the noises? Isn't that the challenge? Because if I go to a mountain alone, I find silence. I don't have to look for that silence.
Yeah, we live in a very different time now. There are not many people living a dedicated life in a temple or a monastery anymore.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think
No.
it might be easier to go to
But
a temple.
yeah, but the origin of the temples and the monasteries was they were places of learning, education, study, science, all originate in those centers. And so the circumstances were created away from the primitive life of the other people. The circumstances of the ancient monasteries and temples, all alike, was to create that condition where energy is allowed to rise up and fuel these higher levels of consciousness, which were then put to use to contemplate, to study, but also to teach eventually. And if correct, people don't stay all their life in a temple or a monastery, except maybe for the leaders of the temple. But most monks, after years of formation, study, growth, development, are being sent out to live among the normal people, to become guides, to become spiritual guides and teachers also, and to give people advice, counsel, etc. Sooner or later they have to come down the mountain and serve. But you lay the foundation there. These days, you are right, you can do it here in the middle of a city, and we have all the tools available and circumstances also that didn't exist in the past, when life was much more primitive and very rudimentary. There is an interesting anecdote about the Buddha that that kind of tells the story of sensible practice of austerity. Gautama the Buddha was a prince, so he was born in a royal palace, surrounded by luxury and comfort. Gautama the Buddha, however, had a natural tendency towards spirituality. And as he grew up, the story goes, the anecdote goes, that he was about to get married. Marriage was arranged by his parents and the parents of a princess to get married. The story goes, it's always a little bit dramatized, of course, these kind of anecdotes. The story goes that the night before he was going to be wedded, he fled the palace through an underground secret passageway. All old palaces have secret passageways for the inhabitants to flee when there is danger. So he left the palace through this passageway to join a sect of fakirs. Fakirs, we just mentioned, are pushing austerity to the extremes. The reason why he did this was he felt stuck. He felt that the luxury and comfort of the palace kept him down. It didn't challenge him to have these amounts of energy to feed his need for his leaning towards spirituality. So he joined the fakirs, totally the opposite of luxury and comfort, in order to fulfill this need for spirituality. And the story goes that he lived with the fakirs for 6 years. He threw off his clothes when he entered into the forest and joined this tribe of the community of fakirs, and dedicated himself to a life of austerity, eating only roots and grasses and very austere food, and of course lots of exercising and what have you. As the story goes, he came across many challenges and obstacles, but after spending 6 years with the fakirs, he started to notice that his health was deteriorating. He felt that his heart was not functioning properly anymore, his organs started to fail, and he had a feeling that if he would continue, he would simply die from basically poverty in nourishment. So he said, life in the comfort and luxury of the palace is not the answer. I thought living a life of austerity would be the answer, but I come to the conclusion, I'm dying now. My body is failing me, and so this also cannot be the solution. So he then decided to leave this tribe of fakirs. He exited the forest, and the first thing that he came across was a goat. And the story goes, he approached the goat and he fed himself, he nourished himself with the milk of the goat. And that was the start of his recovery back to health, and it led him to sit under his tree with a big smile of contentment and a big belly. And that is where the concept of the golden mean of the Buddha comes from. It's not left, it's not right, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not pure luxury and comfort, it's not pure austerity and suffering, it's somewhere in the middle. That is the golden mean of the Buddha, or the middle way. So austerity also doesn't mean that you have to throw away all your worldly possessions, as many yoga teachers will teach you. Austerity, get rid of all your worldly possessions and eat only the bare necessities to feed yourself. To thrive spiritually, you need a foundation, a material foundation, without which you would simply be left to function on your lower instincts of survival. To create a situation in which you can thrive spiritually, you need to be, all your basic needs need to be met. And they are material, but they're also emotional. In a material sense, there should be a place of comfort, a roof over your head that is not too cold, but also not too hot, that is free from distractions. Bugs flying into your window, or lizard crawling over the floor, or it should be free from those kind of distractions and threats also. So it has to have a wall so that robbers cannot enter your place, or other people with bad intention. But also you need to have a steady supply of food. Often temples and monasteries have their own gardens, so that they don't have to depend on the outside world for their supply of food. Safety and security are important elements to thrive spiritually. So that is where the idea of the temple and the monastery comes from. And we can create this situation for ourselves as well. Austerity does not mean getting rid of all comfort and luxury just for the sake of it, because you need a certain foundation upon which you can build, upon which you can thrive. So it's all about common sense, using common sense. You need to have that foundation, but you don't have to gather more than you actually need. It's a matter of contentment, also a matter of the other subjects that we have discussed so far. The golden mean, keep this in mind also with whatever it is that we talk about in class, in yoga, but also where it comes to life. Fanaticism hasn't brought anybody anywhere. The best approach always lies somewhere in the middle, using common sense. Yeah, very important also, attitude. If you look at higher yoga, where there is energy control, which you learn in this course, in the form of pranayama, but mudra is, have you ever heard of mudra? Mudra is a widely misunderstood element of yoga. And many people who know something about yoga, when you talk about mudra, they will say, that is hand movements. Huh? Hand movements are symbolical. This, for example, is a very common gesture, mudra, that you will see in spiritual shops where you can buy little statues that are actually sitting like this. But what does it mean? It is the meaning that is important. The gesture in itself is empty. The hand in front of the heart means that you make a vow. In front of the heart, sincerity, you make an honest vow. The index finger is the finger that you use to point at yourself, is ego. The thumb is the biggest finger on your hand. It represents solidity, control. So, I vow to control my ego. That is what this means. Now, people who don't understand mudra or the concept of mudra think that sitting like this will help you to control ego. And of course it doesn't. This is symbolism. It's only a reminder for uneducated, illiterate people. It is the thought. No, not the thought. It is the feeling behind the symbolism. You have to understand in your heart what this entails, and then try to implement it in daily life. That is mudra. So, make a long story short, what does mudra actually mean? It's about control through attitude. You take on an attitude to control yourself. Control your subconscious thought flows. Control your ego. And the nature of most mudras, not all, the nature of most mudras really is about control. Why is that important? It's a story that goes back to the introduction workshop. It preserves energy. Energy that then is put to work on higher levels of consciousness. Is this difficult? It may sound difficult, but you're already doing this when you do your asana pose. In asana, you subject yourself to discomfort while staying in control. You not only stay in control by standing still, but you stay in control when it gets difficult, when it gets challenging. And you try to stay in the pose as long as you can, but without losing control. The moment that you start grinding your teeth, holding your breath, muscles shaking, sweat breaking out, you have lost control. And you're scattering a lot of valuable energy. That is what that control means here. By choosing an attitude to stay calm and controlled while you subject yourself to discomfort, instead of losing energy, spending energy, you generate a lot of valuable energy. But you have to learn where to stop. And that is based on experience. Experience makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. And it is based on following your feeling. And every time you get better and better at it. There are people who engage in very extreme forms of austerity. We have had a look at the fakirs, which goes back thousands of years, but we have these kind of people in the modern world too. It's the people that do Ironman triathlon. Have you heard of Ironman triathlon? You know what a marathon is, right? It's running 42 point something kilometers. An experienced sports person can run a marathon in maybe the world record is like 2 hours and 10 minutes, close to that. A non-professional will take 3 or even 4 hours to complete a marathon. But it is a battle of attrition. And in the long term, it damages the knees, the hips, mainly the knees and the hips, but some cases also the ankles. They get worn out. They are subject to accelerated aging process, in fact, as a result of such extreme form of exercise. Well, a marathon is only part of a triathlon. A triathlon starts with swimming. I don't know exactly the distance, but it is more than an hour swimming. Then you have cycling, I think 200 kilometers cycling. And then you have 42 kilometer running. Full marathon. Now, Ironman triathlon is 3 times each element. So 3 times the distance of swimming, 600 kilometer cycling, and then 125 kilometer running. You're allowed only 5-minute power naps in between. So it's more like it's something that cannot even be done within a day. And there are people who subject themselves. It's an instinctive need to austerity, but pushed very, very extreme, to the very extremes of what we can do. Damaging is, of course, too much and not really fulfilling the purpose of what we are trying to talk about here, what austerity means. But on the other side of the coin, there are You know, I live in an apartment complex. That apartment complex has 24 flats. And these days with a smartphone, you can measure everything. You walk from one side. On the other side, I live in the first one, at the front of the apartment complex. And the supermarket is at the other end of the apartment complex. And I look at my phone, it's 500 meters from one side to the other. I live in the front, and in the front there are also a church, there are 2 kindergartens, and the maintenance office is there, the administration and maintenance office of the apartment. So many people flock to that area to drop off their children, to go to church, or to go to the maintenance office for some administrative affairs or something. Now in Korea, if you live in an apartment complex, you have a sticker on your window that gives you access to that apartment complex. So what I see is people dropping off their children or coming to church by car who have a sticker of our apartment complex on the front, on the windshield, which means they are not living farther away than 500 meters. That is, of course, the opposite of austerity. But not only that, they go by car to the gym to exercise. They go there by car, they take the elevator to the 3rd floor, they change their clothes and start exercising. Common sense tells you that just walking the couple of 100 meters that it takes you to get there is a nice warming up, is a good form of movement, exercise, to prepare you. Walk up the stairs to the 3rd floor is really not that much. Or, you know, I'm trying to be a little bit light-hearted here, but you take the elevator to go to the 3rd floor and you then go onto a stair climber to exercise. You could have just walked the stairs and then do some other exercising instead, maybe. But I'm not exaggerating. I've worked in that gym for 8 years. I know the people there. There were people are living around the corner. If they take the shortcut, it's a 300-meter walk. If you take the proper road around the block, which you have to go around the 63 building, from their flat to the gym, it's maximum 500-600 meters. I know members of the gym who would take their car from that flat, drive around the block, into the basement of the gym, take the elevator, and start exercising, and go back home by car. You don't believe it that this is even possible, that people would even do something like that, but it happens. It's all a matter of common sense, of course. Use the environment, use the world around you to do your practice of austerity. And you know, your children, if you drive them for just a couple of 100 meters from home to the kindergarten, you don't teach them good healthy habits. It would be better if you take them on foot or by bicycle and teach them some healthy habits by giving the good example. In the end, we all have to determine ourselves how far we go. I have engaged fanatically in sports because it helped me to canalize my energy, restless energy. But when it was time to quit, I also just quit. Having fulfilled its purpose, I then moved on to a little more sensible way of practicing austerity. If you follow your feeling, you will know. You will know when you need to engage. You also know when you are actually harming yourself by demanding too much, pushing yourself too hard. But remember this, austerity is important because our energy is our most precious asset. And it determines how we function, not only physically, but also intellectually. And of course, it opens the door to functioning on even a higher level of consciousness, on the spiritual level. And the physical body is like a car. A car needs regular maintenance. It needs to have good quality gasoline, fuel. If you put in poor gasoline, poor quality gasoline, the energy will start to splutter and eventually break down. You need to grease the moving parts. The engine oil needs to be refreshed once in a while. If you don't do maintenance to a car, it will start to fall apart. It will start to rust away. The engine will start to break down. The physical body is just like that. For the car, maintenance means using good quality gasoline, maintaining all the moving parts, using grease and oil. For the physical body, it means input of nutritious, pure foods, healthy foods, and movement. Our body simply needs movement. We can't escape that. And it is up to each individual to fill in the intensity that is required to fulfill the purpose for each of us. Lot of one of the big complaints that many people have these days is depression, gloominess. And we don't actually really know why. I feel so down, but why? I don't know. I don't know why. So we go to a doctor, and we now live in a time that a doctor has a pill for everything, and for depression they give you antidepressants. But it's all about energy. Unless depression is clinical, which is of course a serious issue, most depressions will be solved if only we would just move a little more, if we would crank up the heat inside us through movement, through exercise, through the practice of austerity. Good. Questions? Okay, let's have a short break.